Welcome to Lingthusiasm, a podcast that's enthusiastic about linguistics. I'm Gretchen McCulloch, and I'm here with Dr. Hanna-Máret Outakoski, who's a professor of Sámi languages at the Sámi University of Applied Sciences in Kautokeino, Norway. She's a native speaker of Northern Sámi and Finnish, and a fluent speaker of Swedish. She can read German and uses English mainly for academic publishing purposes. And today, we're getting enthusiastic about multilingual literacy. But first, some announcements. We've commissioned a jazzed up version of the Lingthusiasm logo with fun little doodles in the classic shape of the Lingthusiasm squiggle adorning your podcast reader right now. Now filled in with some linguistics and Lingthusiasm references in little tiny doodles. See how many you can spot. And we're going to be sending out a sticker with this new design to everyone who's a patron at the Lingthusiast level and higher as of July 1st, 2025. So if you want to get this sticker that can adorn your laptop, water bottle, and help maybe connect you to other people who are enthusiastic about linguistics, go to patreon.com/lingthusiasm. If you just want to see a version of this sticker and see how many of the little doodles you can identify, you can go to lingthusiasm.com or at Lingthusiasm on all the social media sites, and we'll be posting about it a lot. Our artist, Lisa Maddox, did a really great job, and we're so excited to share this design with you. Our most recent bonus episode was about the linguistics of kissing. From the physical articulation of kisses, which involves the mouth, much like many linguistic things, as well as the social significance of kissing in various ways, various times, to various classes of people, to writing kisses as X's and with emoji. All of that and 98 other bonus episodes at patreon.com/lingthusiasm and help keep the show going. Hello, Hanna-Máret. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
It's so nice to have you here.
It's really good to be here.
So we're going to get into more of your work later, but let's start with the question that we ask all of our guests, which is, how did you get interested in linguistics?
So I grew up in a multilingual region in northern Finland, and that's kind of as far north in Europe as one can get. And in my childhood, most people living there, they knew my indigenous heritage language, that's the Northern Sámi. And they also spoke either Finnish or Norwegian or both. And we also learned a lot of English in school and through TV. And my home was also right at the border of Finland and Norway. And there was only a river marking the state borders, and languages flowed quite freely in that region. And for many people, knowing languages was quite natural. So most people didn't kind of think about so much about the languages, but my father was always talking about some linguistic traits or challenges or other matters. And he was a special teacher and had always had an interest in languages and for linguistics. And his language enthusiasm spread into my life very early. And he also read to me and encouraged me to read a lot in different languages. And then we used to talk about the literature afterwards. I was also really fascinated by the language knowledge and cultural knowledge that my Sámi relatives had, although most of them were not academics. And the Sámi speakers in the generation before mine were actually the last ones to grow up speaking mainly Sámi, and their language was so beautiful and so effortless. So I kind of decided quite young that I would pursue a career working with my heritage language and do my best to support its survival.
So that led you into linguistics?
Yeah, but first I considered a career as a translator or interpreter, and I actually got a basic training in that also. But I worked as an interpreter mostly just to make some money so that I could continue studying at university. Mm-hmm. And I studied Sámi, Finnish, linguistics, pedagogy, and I got a bachelor's degree in Sámi language. And some of my professors then encouraged me to reach for the master's degree and then continue with the PhD.
And did you go right into Sámi language revitalization work, or were you doing more academic stuff?
Well, my first attempt with the PhD was actually in formal linguistics. So I was working on reflexivity and reciprocity in Sámi, and this more specifically with government and binding theory, which had at that time not yet lost its glory. But I actually never finished the thesis, and instead my teaching responsibilities grew every year, and I started noticing that I was more interested in the use of language than in some isolated syntactic structure. So I don't want anyone to get me wrong here. I'm really grateful for having acquired a base in formal linguistics, since it has given me the tools not only to describe my language, but also to problematize and solve some issues that our traditional prescriptive grammars in Sami languages are not able to explain. So it's just that at some point I started thinking more about the work that was needed to keep the language in daily use and not just the structures.
But you have a doctorate now, so you went back and did something else?
Yeah, so my second attempt to finish the doctoral degree was happily a bit more successful, and I got the chance to gather texts written by multilingual Sami children in 3 countries. And me and my colleagues, we used something that's called keystroke logging to trace the ways our writers express their thoughts and ideas in 3 languages. And I really found that project very inspiring, although it also showed me how challenging it can be to work with schools and pupils. And after that PhD, I got a chance to do my postdoctoral studies within applied linguistics and educational sciences.
So 3 languages, that would be Sami, Swedish, Norwegian, Finnish. That's 4.
Yeah, so I was in 3 countries, so it was the majority language of all the countries. So in Finland, Finnish, and Sweden, Swedish, and in Norway, Norwegian. And then all the kids here in Nordic countries also study English. So that was the 3rd language.
Ah, okay. So the 3rd language, depending on the country they did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you sort of bring all of these different backgrounds together?
Yeah, I think that all of the steps on the way, they have been really important for me. So I'm not like a nerdy expert in any given subject, but I have gotten a lot of experience from different fields, which actually is a necessity when working with literacy development in a kind of revitalization context.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's really interesting about language revitalization work, is that it draws really on all of the different areas of linguistics.
Yeah, that's true. So I kind of moved away from that personal academic interest and those long days in the office analyzing some specific language structures, and then moved toward research that actually comes from the needs and interests of the language community. I think that I still steer all of my projects like kind of toward the field that I master the best, whether it be literacy development or language didactics or teaching of languages in virtual environments and worlds. But that's only so that I can do my best in the projects that I initiated in collaboration with, for example, Sami language teachers.
So if they want to have some aspect of the grammar explained to them, then your training in formal linguistics can help you do that?
Yeah, it can do that. And then I also feel that kind of all that, my knowledge, I don't want to kind of lose that. I kind of steer the project, even though I want them to be initiated by the teachers, but I tell them, well, these are the fields that I know best. So can we do something together within these fields?
That makes sense. Like it's sort of a collaboration.
Yeah.
I want to maybe back up a little bit because, I'm from Canada. I don't know all of the details about the Sami languages. You mentioned already that they're spoken in 3 countries. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about Sami languages and how they relate to other languages in the area.
Yeah, so there are several Sami languages and also Sami groups living in a quite big geographical area. It stretches from middle Scandinavia in Norway and Sweden over the northernmost Finland and all the way to Kola Peninsula in Russia. So it's a huge area, and many Sami still live in their traditional home settlement regions, but many have also moved within the traditional home region. So, for example, I live now in a bigger city in Sweden that is also included in Sápmi, but I come from a little Sami village located at the border of Norway and Finland. And I also know that a large group of Sami live in the bigger cities in the outskirts of Sápmi and also in the capital cities of Nordic countries.
And there are several Sami languages?
Yeah, so the common understanding at the moment is that there are still 9 surviving languages, but actually the situation of the smallest languages on the Russian side of Sápmi, that is not the land of the Sami people, it is quite uncertain, and all of the smaller Sami languages are really extremely vulnerable to changes in speaker networks. So all Sami languages are endangered.
And for you, which of these Sami languages are you closer to?
So I guess I have a special relationship with the language that I speak myself, that is Northern Sámi or North Sámi. And it is the largest of the Sami languages, but exactly how many speakers there are, that is unknown. Even I don't know how many people there are. And this is due to the restrictions in keeping statistics over ethnicity and minority languages in Sweden and Norway.
Oh, interesting.
So what we do know with certainty is the number of children who are studying Sami languages in compulsory school in the 4 countries. And that number is actually well under 4,000 individuals.
Ooh.
So, and more than half of them are studying Sami as a second language or as just a separate subject in school. And only less than 1/3 of the pupils have Sami as their main language of instruction. So all of those pupils who study everything in Sami, they live either in Norway or in Finland, not in Sweden or in Russia. And I think that the language situation of the school-aged children serves as a quite good mirror of the rapid changes in demography and language shift among my people. So, yeah.
So there's no Sami language school in Sweden or in Russia?
We have Sami schools in Sweden, but even there, the Sami language is a subject, and they do have some other school subjects also taught in Sami, but not fully.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very lucky. I went to school where all of my, like everything from biology to mathematics, everything was taught in Sami. So I was very happy and lucky that I grew up in the Finnish Sami.
In Canada, we have these like French immersion schools where all of the subjects are in French, but the students are generally English speaking. And people have been quite excited about them. But now that the first generations have gone through the French immersion schools, they come out and they sort of speak French, but they also don't necessarily speak French the way someone who uses French in everyday life speaks French. Do the kids come out speaking Sami?
Well, I think that, like you said, it depends a lot if they get it at home, if they have it in their free time. So there are still children who come from Sami homes where they hear it in their everyday life and not only in school. And for those children, like, I think that it's really, really good to be able to study the language also as a subject in school.
Yeah, of course.
But I have also seen that it's not a guarantee that they will learn Sami, even though they go to so-called Sami schools. So it's not, they need support at home and everywhere, and not only in school.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've worked a lot on teaching writing and literacy in the Sami context. How does that interact with speaking and with the work in the schools?
So even though my research focus is on teaching and learning writing in the Sami context, I would not want to compare or kind of separate speaking and listening and writing from each other. So what I mean is that all of those skills are needed in literacy development. And I think that my own teaching methods, they always combine all the three all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've seen in my school research projects is that writing in Sami is often left with least attention in the primary schooling of Sami children. And I've also seen that there are great differences between the countries. So Finland is globally known for extensive reading and writing instruction. And the education of Sami children in Finland includes more writing than, for example, the education of the Sami in Sweden.
What do you think is the way that you prefer going about it?
Well, I always promote language didactics that has more balanced take on the teaching of different language skills. So I think that the kind of imbalance that I've noted in my projects, it really risks leading into a situation where the coming generations will no longer be able to withhold the literacy traditions of the Sami society. So I've also seen that many times people are kind of hostages of their own language beliefs or ideologies. So this kind of mantra about Sami languages being oral languages, it is outdated, but it's also very regularly used by the Sami themselves. And many people therefore believe that written language threatens the oral traditions when it, of course, in fact, can strengthen those and other traditions too. So we are still kind of in a kind of hegemonic situation where we have these kind of ideas that Sami has been the spoken language in the history and it should be like that forever.
What are some of the literary traditions of Sami society?
Well, we have actually had, like, there are really, really old Sami joiks, and they look almost like poems, very beautiful poems that are already in the 1500s that were written down. So we have this long tradition, and we have even a lot of religious texts that were written in Sami, and some like novels that came in the beginning of 1900s. So, but there has been like books for teaching and that kind of thing. So we have had possibilities to teach and learn writing, but it just has never been part of the school system before. That's came much later.
Oh, yeah. So having, children who are learning Sámi in school be able to connect with those historic literary texts as well seems really interesting and important.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if the kids are so interested in that kind of literature. I'm not sure about that.
Okay, yeah. Maybe something from the 1500s is less interesting to modern day children. That's true. Maybe when they get a bit older, some of them might be interested.
Yeah, I think they are. The oldest poems are really, really beautiful, and it's so nice to think that people have had this kind of tradition of making joiks and really beautiful love poems. But yeah, I don't know if the young kids like that so much, but they might.
Yeah. So a joik is a kind of poem, or
joik is. Yeah, it's part of our song tradition.
Mm-hmm.
So there are joiks that don't have so many words, but there are also long joiks that have like almost like epic stories that are being told about the history and so on.
Oh, cool.
So we have had that. It is also something that is kind of vanishing at the moment, joik tradition. So not so many people know how to do it anymore, and not so many people know the old joiks. But there are still some really good people who know that.
That sounds really cool. Is it more of a private community thing, or are there people who put them on YouTube or something like that?
Well, it's not like I've learned that in Canada there are some groups that it's very sacred knowledge, the singing knowledge. But in the Sámi society, we have some special joiks that are given. We joik people. We don't joik about them.
Mm-hmm.
So some of them are private within families, but most of them, like for example, there are very nice animal joiks.
Oh, cool!
And we joik even the animals, and we joik also, for example, the mountains and the waters. And when you're joiking them, you give them kind of a substance, a musical substance, so they become alive in the music. And those are shared within the society. So they are open. And there are even archives where you can go listen to some joiks.
Oh, cool. Maybe we can link to one or two examples of those if people want to go see in the show notes. I think we're answering some of these questions already, but do you want to talk any more about why teaching and learning writing is important in this Indigenous language context?
Yeah, I think that maybe the best and the shortest answer to this question is very simple. It is for the same reasons as writing in any language. So writing is a way of remembering, describing, and imagining. And today, writing skills are also needed for full participation in the democratic society. So writing and reading in, for example, North Sámi makes it possible to take part in the trans-Nordic Sámi society. And teaching and learning writing, it happens most often in schools. And thus, having access to writing instruction and writing opportunities in school is really crucial for the development of Indigenous literacy. But, of course, there are a number of factors that can hinder the process of learning and teaching Indigenous children to write and read in their own languages. And in Sápmi, we are faced with many problems, but mainly three kinds of challenges. And those are either connected to the shortness of human resources, or shortness of adequate teaching materials, or to the shortness of teaching hours, or all of them in some combination. Mm-hmm. So the kind of reasons for promoting teaching and learning of writing are the same between people and languages, and that's what I think at least. But the available human and material resources might differ, as might the width and the breadth of writing opportunities. So there are internal and external ideologies and kind of language attitudes that often value writing in the majority language a lot higher than writing in Indigenous languages. And we still have to remember that there are really no analphabet or illiterate over 6-year-old Sámi today. So we all can read and write in our respective majority languages, but most Sámi are actually insecure about writing in their own heritage language, and many have never even been taught how to do it.
Because reading and writing skills don't, even though Sámi uses the same alphabet, I think, as Norwegian and Finnish and so on. At least I've never seen it written with a different alphabet.
Now we have our own some special letters in Sámi, in North Sámi. But also the problem is that most of the Sámi languages don't share the same orthography, so we don't write our languages the same way.
Okay,
which is a problem. So North Sámi has its own special letters, and then South Sámi Lule-Sami, they do in a different way. So it also is kind of something that makes it a bit complex and difficult.
But even if people know the alphabet already, or most of the alphabet without, depending on the special letters, that doesn't mean that the skill of reading and writing necessarily transfers automatically to another language.
No.
You also have to have training in practicing using it.
Exactly. And there are so many special traits. In North Sámi, for example, we have gradation.
Okay.
So gradation, consonant gradation, which makes it quite difficult. So you really need to have training in how to write so you get things right.
What do you mean by consonant gradation?
So we have, for example, if we have a subject that is in nominative, then it has different consonants in the middle of the word than it would in the accusative in one of the word groups. So you have to even keep track of the consonants within the words. So it's kind of a complicated system, and it's not always so intuitive for the kids, I have to say.
Yeah. So maybe this explains, I've usually seen Sami written with a double A, but I've noticed in your work that you write it with an A with an acute accent mark on it, just a single A. Are these different variations between different Sami languages?
Yeah. So Northern Sámi speakers, we call the native land for Sámi. And the Sami people, call them for Sami or Saamelash, and the language is called Sami kieli, the Sami language. And all of these Sami language groups, they have their quite close variants of the name spelled slightly in different ways in each language, and at least 3 different spellings of Sami language used in English sources. So those are the one that you said, Sami with 2 A's, and there is also a Sami with only 1 A. And the one that I use, that is Sami with a single A acute, which is the spelling of my own language. And I think that the 2A variant, it's more often seen in sources that originate from Finland. And the 1A variant is often used by non-Sami academics outside Finland.
Okay.
And the last variant is then very often used by North Sámi academics. So that's why I use it also. But I have also many times been forced into using the 1A variant, since the journal or the book publishers that have the English that they want to have, they prefer that variant.
It seems like the variant with just 1A, because it is a long vowel, like that's what both the double A and the acute accent is trying to convey, is that it's Sami, not Sami.
Yeah, exactly.
So just having the single A with no accent or anything doesn't convey that.
No, because you could say Sami too, so it's only Sami, and it doesn't sound good for us.
It would be like a different word or something, yeah.
Yeah. But then there are, of course, if you're looking at older sources, then you would find the pejorative and outdated terms, Lappish for the language and Laps for the people. And those are no longer okay to use. But otherwise, I would not want to say to anyone else which of the Sami spellings they should choose. So if I'm allowed, then I always prefer the A acute variant that is more closest to my own language.
Sounds good. Well, we're going to use the A acute variant in this interview because that's what you use. Do you have any other fun facts about Sami language or grammar that you'd like to share?
Well, I'll go with a really hardcore linguistic fact about Sami languages.
Okay.
So Sami languages have a negation that agrees with the subject in person and number. So in the traditional Sami grammars, it has also therefore often been categorized as a verb, although it, at least in the generative tradition, would rather be a functional head of a negation phrase. And in Southern Sami, the negation can also carry tempus, like time, morphology, if there is no auxiliary that can do that job. And that has been considered even a better proof of the negation being a verb. However, the Southern Sami is a so-called affix hopping language that leaves the main verb in the verb phrase, while Northern Sámi always needs some verb to occupy the head of the tempus phrase and can never show time on negation. But these kind of things, when you're looking at the traditional grammars, you don't get the explanation to these things, and then people just have to decide, well, how do we categorize negation if we don't look at the structures that could be behind these things? And then you get these labels that just don't feel quite right.
Yeah, it seems like, okay, is this a verb? Is this not a verb? It could be a sort of interesting position for learners to find themselves in, of like, what am I trying to learn here?
Yeah. Exactly.
That's a sort of academic or formal linguistic approach to looking at Sami grammar. You also have this paper about applying Indigenous methodologies to literacy. Do you want to say a bit more about what you mean by Indigenous methodologies in this context, or how they relate to literacy?
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess that in that paper, I actually highlighted that we are still missing those robust Indigenous methodologies in the field of literacy research. And as long as we don't have any specific Indigenous methodologies, we may be forced to continue using at least some of the Western data gathering methods and analyzing methods. So I think the main point of that paper was really to show that also literacy research should try to follow as many of the Indigenous research principles as possible, even when the methods are still on their way and being developed and not there yet. So in that way, it is possible to keep some of the Western methodology also in Indigenous literacy context, but at the same time, make sure that we do not do any harm and that we try to make research relevant also for the language communities that we collaborate with.
So you're seeing it sort of as a combination of the kind of best parts of both worlds, or just sort of working with what we have at this point?
Yeah, I guess. I think that maybe I'm a bit of a pragmatic researcher in the way that I do not kind of wish to turn my back on methods that are part of well-known Western methodologies if they work for the thing that I want to do. But I just want to find ways to make the research relevant for the participants. So I guess that's why the word collaboration is kind of so central for my own personal research designs, and sometimes to the point that I'd actually rather be out there in the field supporting and helping to develop Indigenous and minority pedagogy rather than really producing academic papers that are randomly actually read by our Sami participants. So I'm not saying how other people should do or how they should feel, but I'm just telling that what it feels like to be a speaker and a researcher of a highly endangered language. And I can't really afford making a career only for the collection of academic points.
Yeah, that's a really good point, that there's an increased sense of urgency to say, well, but I can't just write papers that no one is going to read except my fellow academics. You need to do something actually about the language. Do you have any examples of something that you think is particularly important from a Indigenous perspective or as a part of the Western methodologies?
Yeah, I think that when I try to do my best to save Sami languages, even though it's a big job and I might not be able to do so much by myself. So I think that I'm always focusing on giving back. That is one of the very central principles in Indigenous research. And what I mean by giving back is that I try to make the project count for the participants already, during the active research phase by, for example, donating some of my research time for teaching or working in a daycare, or, for example, for producing bilingual materials for the teachers and other stuff and some things like that. And in action research projects, I also try to accommodate the needs of the participants so that they are then able to move forward with their own action plans. And so in a way, I kind of see my role is kind of that of a facilitator and not always just the outsider research, but I'm trying to be the one that facilitates the needs of the participants.
I think that's a good point about trying to have even the process of the research be good for the participants and not just wait until you get the outcomes and then it's going to be really good once I have finally written up the paper. 2 years later, I'm going to come back and here's what I've produced. But also the process of participating itself needs to already be something that's useful for people.
Yeah, and I guess for many of my participants and partners, that's even the more important thing, because they are also learning something when I'm showing them, if I'm helping them with some things already during the project. And like I said, many times the Sami participants are not the ones who are reading the academic papers. So
right.
They, even if I would come back and tell them that, oh, here are 5 papers that I wrote and they came out in these journals, they might just be like, oh, well, good for you. But we actually enjoyed it more when you were here, you were doing some of the hours and you were doing that and that. So yeah, so I always try to kind of find the balance so that I can do that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And something like working in the daycare where you're a Sami speaker and can, be talking to the kids in the daycare in the language, or doing some sort of, fun activities with them or something like that, can be really, really helpful, like at the time, not just like, oh, we came back with this outcome about here's how we should change the daycare to make it more effective, after all of this time.
Yeah, exactly.
You've also mentioned that there can be a bit of a clash between protectionism and encouragement when it comes to a heritage language. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so sometimes as a speaker of North Sámi, I kind of wish that we had already reached the same proportions of language shift as some of the smaller Sámi languages.
What is the situation in the smaller Sámi languages at the moment?
Yeah, well, there are few languages. For example, here, very close to where I live now, there is a Sámi language called Ume Sámi.
Mm-hmm.
And there are, at the moment, maybe 2, 3, maximum 10 people that are under 50 years old who are actually learning the language as their first language.
Wow, yeah.
And the middle generation didn't learn it as a mother tongue at all. And so they are just now trying to bring it back to homes. But there are so few people left who can speak the language. And so even the youngest generations who are now studying at school and parents who are trying to start speaking at home when they have been learning some courses, it's really, really different situation than for the North Sámi, the biggest language.
Mm-hmm.
So for those groups, and the only thing that I would then say that I hope that we were also almost at that point, that the only thing why I say this is that we are now in the middle of a huge kind of a wave of change, and the reactions exemplify the clash of this protectionism and encouragement that you were talking about,
mm-hmm.
which I kind of feel sometimes is less prominent in contexts where the community has to work together to save the language from death. They are already kind of being so close to death so that they just now have to either they completely just don't work together at all, or they have to do everything for the language. And we are not there.
It's very focusing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we are not there at all, because our strongest speakers, and those are the older generations, they see how the language of the young people is changing very rapidly at the moment. Because, English, Swedish, Norwegian, Finnish, they are kind of winning in that competition. And some of these older people, they react really negatively, and almost they try to kind of cast a protective spell on language and culture. And in Sámi culture, we often speak about the language police. So that is the individuals and collective forces that assess and openly kind of criticize the language of the younger generations or the new speakers. And most of the time, the younger generations, they react as expected, and they stop speaking and they stop learning the language because, of course, even they are aware of the internal change of the language that is going on between generations. So they can hear their language is not the same, and they may then feel inadequate or wrong or ashamed and many other negative feelings that then reinforce that reaction, that kind of stop speaking reaction. And the consequences of that reaction, it is often called the language stigma, or we say in Sámi, language lock, that's what we say. It just locks the language somewhere.
It sort of like locks a language like behind your tongue where it can't come out of your mouth anymore because you feel so self-conscious about saying it.
Exactly. And of course, I'm not saying that this is what happens everywhere, because there are really skilled people who are very encouraging, and they are good at mentoring young people and speakers and those who are new to the language. And those people, they offer support and models and examples of language when the people are like needing something to look at, and they say that, oh, well, you can reach for this, but they are not kind of deeming they don't deem the learners when they are in the middle of the process of learning the language. And these kind of mentors and teachers, they know that reaching this rich language is very demanding and takes a lot of effort and time and even some luck. So they just need to support for a long, long time.
So they're not going around like shaming the younger people for not speaking the way that they think they should be.
Yeah, exactly. So there is this little group of people who are doing it in that way. And I kind of hope that I also belong to this latter group. So I kind of always value the strong speakers of the older generation, but at the same time, I have a very great respect for the younger generations, because I know that they will be the elders, the oldest and the best speakers of our language in the future when we are gone. So I try to make the learners feel the pride of the language and to feel that they want to reach for as rich language as possible, like they would in the majority language. And I also always tell them that I am a learner and that no one is ever finished learning the language. So that sometimes that helps. And of course, those who do not have the time or the opportunities to use the language or who are repeatedly discouraged during the process by these police or something else, they will probably never become very confident speakers or writers. So it is clear that we, the teachers, we play a significant role in the future of our heritage language. And we have the means to empower and encourage, but we could also create silence. So I hope that we are doing the first one and not creating the silence.
Yeah, and like there are plenty of older English speakers who are not particularly impressed by how younger English speakers are speaking the language, but because it's not undergoing a language shift, the younger English speakers are just like, oh, well, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing because, it's not that they're being shamed out of speaking the language entirely, which is a much different kind of stakes when you have these two different linguistic situations going on.
Exactly. Yeah.
So one of the things that maybe can contribute to younger people having the opportunity to speak the language or practice a language is this thing that you've called language showers, which I think is a cute name.
I'm so glad that you like the name. It's not me. I didn't come up with that.
Okay.
So I saw some newspaper articles in Sweden about language activities for immigrated children. So I thought that was the best kind of way to describe what we were doing.
So maybe we can explain what a language shower is. Yeah.
So it's very important to say that language showers are not the same as full immersion programs in Canada that you were speaking about earlier. And they are not also the same as language nests in Aotearoa, New Zealand.
So those full immersion programs would be more of a language bath where you're fully surrounded by the language?
Exactly. And for long, long periods of time. There is a continuity in that. But language showers, they are all sorts of short-term language immersion activities. They can be language camps and other occasions that aim at kind of creating an environment for the learners where at least the leaders use the target language of the showers. But I've also seen that this practice has to be amended sometimes if most of the learners are complete new beginners. But the long-term goal is to create new domains, additional domains, occasions, and places and spaces where the target language, the Indigenous language, is heard and used all the time. So that's the goal. But yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes the real life situation is more complicated.
Yeah, exactly. And I've seen different examples. I've seen that when the language showers are very well planned and the leaders are linguistically skilled and good with the learners, and when there is enough language support available in the environment, then the showers can truly function as kind of additional engines in the revitalization process. And with the language support, I mean all kinds of aids ranging from pictures and maps, colors, recordings, music, and film, so that you have every kind of support.
And so you're getting sort of more sources of input and examples beyond just what you're seeing right now in the activity.
Exactly, because there are so many different levels in those learners. So I've also seen situations where, for example, the protruding idea of the orality of Indigenous languages, we only speak language, it can actually lead to a situation where the learners have nothing else but the spoken word to lean on. And so their learning is then either hindered or slowed down because they can only hear a language, they don't know anything, they don't know the language before, and they kind of get tired listening to that. It's those who already know how to speak and have some earlier knowledge of the language, they are supported by this kind of method, while the real beginners, they can actually in such situations feel quite outside the group and become very silent.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that some things need to be changed if most people are completely new beginners, because otherwise they can feel this sort of isolation.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that there has to be a lot of support so that it becomes a language engine. So sometimes these kind of language showers, they kind of end up becoming merely kind of cultural meeting places where the language component kind of gets lost on the way. So I think that setting up a new language scene needs some really serious thought behind it to really function as a language strengthening domain, while that kind of a cultural scene can often be set up much quicker. So you need you need to really think about how do we strengthen the language in this domain and not so that it doesn't just become something else.
Yeah. So if you just want to do a cultural thing where you're making traditional food or doing traditional cultural practices, I don't know, clothing or crafts or something like that, then that's something you can do sort of with or without the language.
Yeah, and you could just use words and phrases that go together with that, but then use the majority language most of the time. So it would actually become more like people do get to know the words, but they are not actually going to use the language much more than that.
Yeah, that makes sense. It seems like there's a lot of scope for using language play as part of the language showers to have this kind of relaxed environment for people.
Yeah, and I think that there is a lot of support in earlier research on language and play for the positive effects of play and playfulness on children's language learning and also on their well-being in the majority context. But we don't actually know so much about this when it comes to Indigenous contexts. And so I'm really glad to be part of an international research initiative. It's called Now Play 2. It is led by Professor Shelley Stack-Peterson at OISE in Toronto, in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And within that project, I've had the chance to collaborate with Sámi teachers and learners to really learn more about the effects of play and playfulness in our local Indigenous Sámi context here in Sweden. And also at the same time learn about, there are 20 other Indigenous sites also that are part of this project. So we are kind of all the time learning how play can strengthen these.
That sounds really cool. Maybe we can link to that project in the show notes. So you're someone who's working both in an academic context and also as a community member of the languages that you're studying at the same time. How do you balance that sort of insider-outsider situation?
Well, I don't think that I always manage to find the right balance right away, but I just kind of keep on adjusting my roles until they are at least in some kind of balance. And I try to keep Sean Wilson's 2001 thoughts about relational accountability in my mind. And that means that I am responsible and accountable for all relations to my research partners and participants. But I'm also accountable for the academy. So I have to also think about the rules there.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually get this question quite often, and it's almost a little bit provocative to me. So most researchers who study the use and structure of, let's say, Swedish in Sweden or maybe English in Canada, they are probably also members of the same language community that they study. So
that's true.
So they are usually not asked about being an insider and outsider at the same time, although the same logic should, of course, apply to them. So instead, they kind of just need to prove that they do ethical research and that they think about researcher positionality. So I think that same should apply to me. So I need to be aware of my positionality as a researcher, but the insider-outsider question, I think it should either be skipped or it should be posed to everyone who is an academic and at the same time belongs to a certain community that they are studying.
Maybe ask to everybody to think about like what are the impacts of the research that you're doing on the people that you're doing them for. I think of myself as sort of an insider-outsider when it comes to doing internet linguistics because I was studying, people using language on the internet, but I was also very much using language on the internet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And for me, writing a pop linguistics book that people on the internet would find interesting to read was a way of being like, okay, how do I give back to this particular type of community, even though internet people are not traditionally thought of as like, oh, this is a marginalized group or something like that. But it is a group that I was studying while also being a part of.
Yeah, exactly.
And finally, Hanna-Máret, it's been so great to have you here on the podcast. If you could design a dream project related to Sámi linguistics, what would that be?
Yeah, so since I already work as a linguist in language education, I'm really lucky to get to do very many things that I might not always write academic papers about, but that still matter for the language community and that I also enjoy doing. And there are also a few papers that I'm working on at the moment, but most of them are then connected to research projects. But if I get to kind of talk about a dream project, then I think that I would really have this one big project in my dreams. It's kind of supporting Sámi parents in their language choices and everyday language use. So I really wish that there were I could find these substantial grants, like big grants, to support language revitalization at the grassroots level, so that parents could, for example, use a whole year for intensive language studies.
Yeah.
So it would be so interesting to follow parents who have the opportunity to really take time off their jobs to study the language with the guidance of good teachers. And I think that it would be a great development project, a revitalization project, alongside a really fascinating academic study. So that would be like my big dream study at the moment.
That sounds really cool. For more Lingthusiasm and links to all the things mentioned in this episode, go to lingthusiasm.com. You can listen to us on all the podcast platforms or lingthusiasm.com. You can get transcripts of every episode on lingthusiasm.com/transcripts, and you can follow @lingthusiasm on all the social media sites. You can get scarves with lots of linguistics patterns on them, including the International Phonetic Alphabet, branching tree diagrams, Booba and Kiki, and our favorite esoteric Unicode symbols, plus other Lingthusiasm merch like stickers that say Ask Me About Linguistics, Gavagai, rabbit t-shirts, aesthetic IPA posters, and more at lingthusiasm.com/merch. Lauren's social media and blog is Superlingo. Links to my social media can be found at gretchenmcculloch.com. My blog is allthingslinguistic.com, and my book about internet language is called Because Internet. You can follow our guest, Dr. Hanna-Máret Outakoski, on her website, which we'll link to in the show notes. Lingthusiasm is able to keep existing thanks to the support of our patrons. If you want to get an extra Lingthusiasm episode to listen to every month, our entire archive of bonus episodes to listen to right now, or if you just want to help keep the show running ad-free, go to patreon.com/lingthusiasm or follow the links to our website. Patrons can also get access to our Discord chat room to talk with other linguistics fans and be the first to find out about new merch and other announcements. Recent bonus topics include the linguistics of kissing, linguist celebrities, and the results of our 2024 listener survey, including the name and rules of rock, paper, scissors, aka paper, scissors, rock. And as a reminder, if you're a patron at the Lingthusiast tier or higher, as of July 1st, 2025, you'll also get a snazzy Lingthusiasm logo sticker in the mail to help you find other linguistics fans to nerd out with. Can't afford to pledge? That's okay too. We also really appreciate it if you can recommend Lingthusiasm to anyone in your life who's curious about language. Lingthusiasm is created and produced by Gretchen McCulloch and Lauren Gahn. Our senior producer is Claire Gahn. Our editorial producer is Sarah Dopierella. Our production assistant is Martha Tsutsui Billins. Our editorial assistant is John Crook. And our technical editor is Leah Vellman. Our music is Ancient City by The Triangles.
Stay Lingthusiastic!